Hello, good evening. Welcome everybody. I'm Lori Rose, President of the League of Women Voters of Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area. And I'm very excited to welcome you to our program on community policing and mental health. This is a program that's been a long time in the thought process and a little shorter time in execution. I guess we first started thinking about these issues as a league a couple of years ago, and we did a program called Gun Violence Local Impacts. And we had a speaker from downtown who talked about trauma and the impact of trauma and some of the mental health consequences that lead to and flow from trauma. And for the benefit of those of you who are not aware, I thought I would go back a little bit and talk about how is it that the League of Women Voters, or an organization called the League of Women Voters, comes to be doing a program on policing and mental health. And actually, it's pretty interesting. It goes back to the origins and history of the League, which was founded to bring about the right to women's suffrage, the 19th Amendment, but also the thought that once you have this very important right to vote, how do you know what to do? What do you do with it? How do you become informed? And in those early times, women would get together in attics and hand-published newspapers and get together and study topics. So our League really has two main functions that we do throughout our 100-year history. One is the part that's more well known in the media, the registering of voters and supporting voting rights. We're the oldest voting rights organization continuously operating in the country, but also the education and information part and helping people to understand issues. So two geographical places really frame my thoughts on this topic. And one is my hometown of Rochester, New York. And if you've been following the news, a lot of really unfortunate events coming from Rochester in this space, and something that's really rocked the country as well as the community there. And the second one is last year for International Mental Health Day, our league asked Mayor Pandy to recognize that day. And in handing me the proclamation, he said that one of the biggest surprises to him when he first took over as mayor was the number of calls that he got from policing that had to do with mental health. He was just absolutely shocked and overwhelmed. And I think that all of us would like to know and understand more about how policing in our community interfaces with responses and intervention, both at the adult level and also at the school level. And the way our league works is when we study issues, we create consensus positions, and those positions become something that forms a part of our advocacy. So at our national and state level, there's been consensuses throughout the country and throughout the state, and also here at the local level, that mental health as well as physical health is something important, that it's a right that should be granted to everyone, and services to support that right. So in the service of those goals, we're very excited and thrilled that people from Lake Forest Police Department, officers and social worker have taken their time during a very busy time for policing to share with us their thoughts, their procedures, their challenges. And I hope that this is going to be the start of an exploration for us all to work together and for the league. And we're very excited to have you here. I'll now introduce Katie Anderson, who will describe the structure of the rest of our program and lead us through it. Katie is our Vice President of Program Action and Advocacy. And in that capacity, she's charged with putting these programs together. And I'm very happy to turn it over to her now. Katie.
Thank you, Lori, for your opening comments on League position on mental health and behavioral health. I'd like to give a nod to our sister league, the League of Women Voters of Lake County, who held an event in September on mental health and the pandemic in the Lake County area. And Sheriff John Eidelberg provided many insights on the work that is going on at the county level. So today we're looking at the support system that our local police can provide to the community. And the first topic is the crisis intervention team. who serve as the first responders to potentially volatile situations. And so we'll hear from Commander Rick Anderson and Linda Porter. Secondly, we'll hear from the we'll hear about the Student Resource Officer Program, the SROs, who interact with the youths of the community. And we'll hear from Mark Long and Ben Graham. Feel free to enter questions in the chat box. And so allow me to introduce Commander Anderson first. He is a 26-year veteran of the Lake Forest Police Department, a lifelong law enforcement professional. Commander Anderson began his career as a patrol officer and continued to assume additional responsibility throughout his career. He currently serves as detective commander, overseeing all detectives and school resource officers within the Lake Forest Police Department. Commander Anderson was integral to the creation and development of the Crisis Intervention Team program, which now serves as a model for the other police departments. In addition to his work with the Lake Forest Police Department, Commander Anderson also served for 10 years on the Lake County Major Crime Homicide Task Force, on which he was promoted to assistant commander. Commander Anderson earned his Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice from the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh. He is also a graduate of the Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command. And I'd like to also introduce Linda Porter, who is a licensed clinical professional counselor and board certified counselor with over 25 years of experience in both the private and public sectors. She has been working with the Lake Forest Police Department for the past 6 years. She works in tandem with community agencies, schools, and other organizations. She maintains an office at the police department headquarters and often accompanies officers on calls in order to better serve the community. One of her greatest professional accomplishments is the development of the Crisis Intervention Team program along with Commander Anderson. This program is focused on minimizing the trauma and risk involved in crises. Linda also maintains a private practice in Deerfield, where she counsels individuals, couples, and families. In addition to a master's in counseling, Linda also earned a master's in industrial relations and human resources, and is a graduate of the Contextual Behavioral Therapy Fellowship at the University of Chicago. So welcome, and tell us a lot about the Crisis Intervention Team program.
All right, Katie, thank you and the League of Women Voters of Lake Forest and Lake Bluff. We appreciate you giving us the time to talk about this topic and the SRO program as well. So thank you for your time. I'd like to start basically with, you had mentioned, the CIT program, or Crisis Intervention Team program. So what is it, the CIT program? It's basically a local program designed to improve the way law enforcement and the community respond to people experiencing from mental health crisis. These programs basically are built on strong partnerships between law enforcement, mental health providers, and advocates. You might ask, who are the advocates? Well, advocates can be a lot of things. It can be groups of individuals like yourself. It can be individuals. It can be a family member of someone experiencing a mental health crisis, or a best friend. Those people are advocates. It can be even like a state senator or a state representative advocating for better rights and better, budgeting for people experiencing from mental health crisis. So advocates can mean a lot of things. We at the Lake Forest Police Department are pretty lucky. We have Linda Porter. Basically, she's an advocate for us at the police department. She helps us bridge the gap between law enforcement and the proper care for a person, suffering from mental health crisis. Prior to her coming to us in this aspect, it didn't exist at all. So we're very thankful for that, bridging that gap. There's a misconception sometimes out there that the CIT team in that is a law enforcement only training program. In fact, the CIT program, it's based on a community-based program with multiple partners in several goals, with only one of which is law enforcement officer training. So I wanted to get that misconception out there. Remember, it's a team program, so it's a team of people involved and not just law enforcement. We are law enforcement, and I'm talking about the law enforcement aspect of it now. So, I'll just discuss some of the law enforcement side of it. The CIT program Started with Linda Porter, myself, and another detective who recently retired in 2016. You know, to backtrack a little bit prior to that, in 2014, I attended the Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command. And in 14, it's a 10-week program for supervisors. So, you know, I did a staff study. My staff study basically was based on police response to mental illness. I had to look at a couple different things and answer 2 questions regarding that. You know, is there a need for a CIT program in Lake Forest? And if there's a need for a CIT program, can we do a better job responding to people suffering from a mental illness or a crisis? And basically during that 10 weeks and doing that staff study, the answer to both those questions are yes and yes. There's a need for it in Lake Forest, and we could do a better job responding. You know, why is there a need in Lake Forest? Like anywhere else, a mental illness can happen to anyone in any group. It's not just the one age, race, gender, ethnic group, or socioeconomic status. It affects everyone. It really does. So early on in the program, you know, we established some visions. They're simple visions, but they're important visions. Basically came down to the safety and health of the person in a crisis, the safety of the community, and the safety of the officers responding to the person maybe suffering from a mental illness and or family. You know, along with the visions, we came up with some law enforcement goals. And obviously, number one, we wanted to de-escalate the situation, the crisis situation, and calm things down as much as possible, reduce the necessity for use of force. No police officer wants to use force in any case or any scenario or any incident unless it's a last resort. We want to also avoid arrest if at all possible. Someone suffering from a crisis is obviously going through a crisis. Do you think by Lake Forest Police arresting someone is going to, you know, help that? No, I doubt it. It's going to cause them to spiral down and even go into more of a crisis situation if we try to arrest them. As a last resort, does it happen once in a while? Sure. But vast majority of the time, it does not happen. We want to avoid that. The last law enforcement goal that we came up with is we wanted to decrease the number of times responding to the same person in a crisis. Best case scenario, we respond one time and we don't respond back. It's probably a win-win for everyone. Unfortunately, there are some people in town, in all communities, where we do respond multiple times to the same person. And we can get Linda involved and, you know, with our CIT program and the officers talking to certain people, but sometimes we still end up responding 2, 3, 4 times in a one person situation. You know, when this program first started, we had to basically get support and buy-in by a lot of people, including the police chief, Carl Waldorf, and Deputy Chief Copeland, along with the officers as well, to participate in the program. If we didn't have our buy-in by the Deputy Chief and Chief who would support it, there wouldn't be a program. So we really appreciated their support because they were 100% behind it and thought it was a good program. Once we received the support, we were able to move forward with budgeting. And with that budgeting, we were allowed to send several officers to a 40-hour CIT training class. The goal is to get as many people as we can through this class. And this class is basically designed to increase awareness of mental health issues and disorders and improve effective interactions with people who have mental illnesses. If we get this training for officers who respond, it was can be much more beneficial. And during that 40-hour training class, which is a lot for law enforcement, most law enforcement classes 1 to 3 days, but this is a 5-day 40-hour class that we attended, or the majority of the people here at the police department attended. What I found very beneficial was there was one day we had role playing, and during this role playing, the instructors brought in semi-professional actors and actresses that volunteered their time to help law enforcement in the process to go through this role playing. We spent an entire day role playing scenarios involving people suffering from a mental illness or in the middle of a mental illness crisis. So that part of it was very, very beneficial. I think we also had instructors that were doctors, psychiatrists, social workers, professionals that were in the mental health field, and as well as they brought in people who are actually experiencing a mental health crisis. I know when I went in 2016, one of the first ones to go, someone came and taught the entire class who was suffering from, bipolar. One was schizophrenia, and one had a paranoia disorder. And it was very, very beneficial to listen to these people, what they're going through on a daily basis. And they also taught the class on, what the police can do better when they respond, and things maybe the police shouldn't do when they respond to someone suffering from their mental illness. This class, I felt, helped us as law enforcement get a better understanding and to be more empathetic with people suffering from mental illness and the daily struggles that they go through. It was eye-opening to me to listen to it and some of the daily struggles. And those daily struggles, while talking to people with a mental illness, you can easily relate that to sometimes even hourly struggles. So it was really eye-opening and beneficial. With our program currently, we have approximately 75% of our police force that have gone through the CIT training course. Right now, we have 37 sworn officers. We're budgeted for 40, and we have approximately 29 of those officers that have gone through the class. With the pandemic, things slowed down a little bit this past year, but we were able to get a new officer through it basically last week, and we have another officer going next week as well. So what does this mean to us? This means that we have at least one officer trained basically on every shift all year long. And I would probably say a likelihood of multiple officers trained on every shift throughout the entire year to handle a call or CIT type call. In 2017, we were also fortunate enough that the chief of police hired an outside company to get every officer trained, some training in de-escalation. So we had an expert come in with an outside agency to get every police officer trained in 2017 in de-escalation techniques. De-escalation is kind of a buzzword in the last few years, and it's an important word, but it has been around for quite a while. When I went to the police academy, well, I don't want to say 25 years ago, 26 years ago, they called it something different, but it was called verbal judo, but we still did it back then as well. And that de-escalation training helps us in not only CIT type calls, but on a vast majority of calls that we go to. So with the buy-in from the chief and deputy chief and getting more training, we appreciate it. Linda, myself, and it was Detective Wendy Dumont, we all also attended the CIT International Conference when it was in Chicago in 2016. It was a 3-day class that we attended. And there were many lectures, speakers, breakout sessions throughout those 3 days where we got to, I think, learn and gain a lot of knowledge on mental illness as well. And we were able to bring back a lot of PowerPoints and papers and paperwork to train other officers on it as well, and some of the things that we learned during that conference. That conference is offered once a year. Luckily, that year it was in Chicago and we were able to attend. So another thing I'd like to talk about just briefly, a lot of you already know this and probably have been on our organization, have heard about NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. It's a great website. They're a great organization. If you want to learn anything and almost everything, even some stats on it, on mental illness, they have a lot of information on the NAMI's website. So I'd recommend people looking into that as well. So right now, how many CIT type intervention calls do we at the Lake Forest Police Department respond to? I mean, people want to know that. It's interesting. And to get more personal, in Lake Forest, what do we respond to? How many a year? I did some research back from 2017 to 2020, and I found basically it was very, very consistent in every year. In fact, 2 of the 4 years, we had the exact same number of CIT type calls. On average, we actually respond to 1 mental health intervention type call every other day in a given year in Lake Forest. So every other day, we're responding to a mental health or crisis type call, which just proves to me that we definitely did need the extra training as well to get the officers to respond to better understand, what's going on when they go there. To give you a perspective, I looked into domestic violence type calls as well, which is just as important as a CIT call. It could be, a verbal domestic violence call, a physical, emotional, any one of those. And when I looked at that, I guess it was a little surprising to me that we responded to a domestic violence type call 1 out of every 3 or 4 days, compared to 1 every other day for a CIT call. That's just to give you a little perspective on how often we respond to a call like that. So basically, how does a CIT call work? I'll talk a little bit about from beginning to end. The majority of the time, it'll start with a 911 call. We'll get from a family member, a friend, sometimes someone driving by. It could be someone on an intersection, not always at a residence, could be a homeless person. But we'll get that call. We'll send at least 2 officers and a supervisor to that call. And likelihood, depending on the severity, we'll send the entire shift if we have to. When we respond to a call, if we go to a house and we've been there before with someone with a mental illness, we do have an alert set up in our CAD system, computer-aided dispatch, in our computer in our car. So it'll pop up as an alert, and it might give the person's name and what mental illness they may suffer from. It's all confidential information, and the police officers, it's very, very important that we know going into it ahead of time for the safety of everyone involved. Makes the entire scene, entire incident that much safer if we can know what's going on ahead of time or what somebody may be suffering from. So that computer-aided dispatch alert call has been added for CIT type calls, or someone may be suffering from a mental illness or a crisis, which has really helped us recently since 2016 as well. So when we get to the scene of a call, going back, I guess, to the first goal, the goal is to de-escalate the situation, calm things down, and to understand and talk to the family and friends or the person in a crisis to find out what's going on. We'll separate people and hopefully get things calmed down and move on from there. So once we get things calmed down, we can understand what the person is experiencing, and we can do what we have to help that person and or the family. What does that mean? Well, sometimes it actually, depending how serious it is, it can mean a voluntary or involuntary committal of someone if need be. They may need resources at a hospital or a mental health facility immediately that we can't offer as a law enforcement agency. Now, there are times when, yes, we can call Linda Porter out to the scene immediately, and she'll respond from home, and she has responded from home on a number of incidents and situations. So she'll respond and she'll do an evaluation on site as well and help us out and give us advice or the family advice and move on from there to see if they need to go to see a mental health professional. Maybe she can talk to them, or simple counseling may work during that situation. When she's there, she can set up appointments for the future as well to talk to somebody. It all depends on the situation, but it is very helpful prior to 16, to have someone like Linda Porter be able to respond to a call if need be. And she does it from home too. Obviously, she doesn't live too far away, but she'll respond if need be. Going over the whole idea of the CIT team and the benefits of it, I think it's been very, very beneficial. And I think the statistics show that there's a need for it and an understanding for it. I think now, more than ever, to get police officers, I think a CIT type call is a more meaningful, thoughtful process in order for us to handle these type of calls to help people. And then the goal is to help people. We want to decriminalize mental health type calls and get them the help they need, and don't put them in a system if we don't have to. Our job is to arrest people, but our job is to help people. And if we can help people and decriminalize it, we'll do that. So I'd like to thank you and turn it over to Linda Porter.
Thank you, Rick. And thanks to all of you for giving us this opportunity to talk about the CIT program, which is so important to all of us. So I'm going to talk about the role of the mental health professional. So what is mental illness? It refers to a wide range of mental health conditions It's a disorder that affects your mood, your thinking, and your behavior. And there's a wide range of symptoms from mild to severe. If you look stuff up, we all have a little bit of something, but the severe ones, the severe symptoms are the ones that usually require a police intervention or a 911 call. And we have people that regularly would be calling. So the goal was to know who they are and to help them out and give them the resources. But in the moment, in a crisis, we want to de-escalate the situation. And with all of the training that all the officers have had, we want to, everyone, I think someone spoke in the beginning about the trauma. Well, there's been a lot of studies on the trauma that somebody endures with, say, an involuntary committal. So we don't want to do that. Nobody wants to do that. It's a horrible position to be in. But most importantly, it can hurt the person, and we do it when we have to, but it's almost a last resort. So I think that that's what our goal is when we get there, is to de-escalate it, bring the person back to their level of functioning before the crisis happened, and then to be able to talk to the family members. Obviously, like Rick said, make sure that nobody gets hurt physically. Community members, if somebody's watching, another family member, and then also to keep police officers safe as well. So if it works the way everyone's trained and that we want it to work, then it's a win-win for everybody. And as Rick mentioned, our policy at Lake Forest Police Department is that when it's appropriate and when it can work, I will sometimes go out on calls. And what's interesting, every call is a little bit different. They're each unique. So if I'm on scene, I can assess the situation certainly differently than just on a phone call, which is certainly in the pandemic now, a lot of times is happening. And there's a lot of things I can follow up with, but in the moment, to be there, to make a connection with a resident and a family member, and then work in conjunction with the officers and do the emotional first aid that's really my role, I think really benefits the community and helps us to meet their needs. Possibly it would be a resource, or tell them about an agency, possibly some short-term counseling in my office, or agencies like, I think most of you probably know, Safe Place, which is a domestic violence agency, is located in the Gorton Center. Like, I think Lake Forest is so fortunate to have a satellite office right there. And they run support groups for, it's mostly women, for the women, and they do counseling. So that's another connection that officers and myself sometimes can give them the referral. And once I've made that eye to eye, I've met the person, if they're hesitant to make the appointment themselves and they give me permission, I can do that for them and help facilitate an appointment for them, or even possibly go with them their first time and do an introduction. Because I do work to know a lot of the people who are directors at the agencies. Part of what I do is I have a file of resources, substance abuse treatment centers, Catholic Charities. I mean, there's a lot of services out there, but we just don't always know them. And I think when we pool our resources all together, it benefits everybody. I'm always looking to know more resources. So I learn from the people as much as I hope that I can give them some information. But one call that comes to mind, I'd been called out with officers and I had made a connection with a family and I was helping them sort through a loss. Somebody had died in their family. So I connected them to Willow House, which I don't know if everybody knows what that is. That's a grief support group. There's no charge. You can make a donation, but they run supports for kids all over. Bannockburn is one of their closest offices to us. And so we got the agency to do a support group just for this family's children and, cousins. And there was a lot of kids. It wasn't one person. But that's a way that I feel like when we're there on the spot, that we can maybe, help them with that piece of it. Because until you're in it, you don't know about these resources that exist. And with the pandemic, there's a lot more resources popping up and there's a lot more need for resources because people are really struggling right now. And so when we can reach out and help them and, try to intervene in a way that we can proactively get them to what they need. If it isn't myself and someone at the police department, hopefully we can point them in the right direction and even make it more comfortable for them to do it. So those are some of the ways when I'm out on a call, but if I'm not out there, I will follow up with people. And sometimes they just give my email out and they'll reach out to me, and then I set up a time. And I think it's pretty well known, but anything with me is confidential. And I think all of us are very sensitive to, there is still a stigma with mental health. And I think we're way better than we were in the past, but we still have a ways to go. And I think each of us can help with that, because there's a lot of people, as Rick said, with the amount of calls we have, there's a lot of people affected by it, and helping everybody out, like we all need each other. And so I think the more we talk about it, the less stigmatized it is. Since we started the program in 2016, I think we've come a long way in just 5 short years with the trainings, but also I've learned, and we've changed different parts of the program already because we're listening to the feedback from the community. We did a presentation at Gorton Center. It was December and it was cold and dark. We didn't have a great turnout. It was our first time. But what I learned is there's apprehension to come to a meeting like that. People had privately reached out to me after and said, I didn't want to come, but I heard about it, but I didn't want my name out there. And so I kind of laughed and I said, well, we're not taking names. Your names aren't going in the paper. But I totally understood their point and why it is a sensitive topic. So it's on our website. We did a presentation. The school resource officers obviously are well aware of the program, but I also have relationships with a lot of the social workers throughout all the schools in Lake Forest. So they also know about it. So, and then lastly, another way that I'm finding the word of the program is getting out is people who, for example, have a child with autism and they're in some kind of support group. They're passing it on to each other, like, oh, they'll be in a support group meeting or at a NAMI meeting, and they'll be able to say, oh, Lake Forest has this program. It's totally voluntary. I never want anyone to think they have to do anything, because they don't. But we have a special assessment form. And I think that's on our website also. Mm-hmm. But if someone calls any of us, we can like leave it for them at the front desk. They never have to meet us. We try to make it as easy as possible. The form has changed over the years already. So it gives someone an opportunity to fill out the form, and you can put a picture of the person that you're identifying as the person who has a mental illness. You can put what it is. It can be autistic, nonverbal, don't get too close. If this person runs away, here's where they usually go. And by the way, for holding a Coke can, he'll calm down. That's like unbelievably helpful information for the person who's involved, because he or she won't be more traumatized when they see a scary police officer walking up, not knowing what they're doing there, if they're in trouble, because you never know what somebody's thinking. So it's like it's a helpful tip, and they can write anything they want on the form. Another example is a family. There's an elderly woman, and she has dementia. She has caregivers. Every once in a while, she gets a hold of a phone. She calls 911, and she announces that her daughter's missing. Well, in her mind, what we figured out is her daughter is 16 years old. Her daughter's about 55. So initially, we think some kid is maybe missing, and you look into it, and it's scary for the lady when they come and for the caregivers. Well, now that her daughter came in and gave us her cell phone number, so now if a call comes in like that, it short circuits everything. The resources aren't sent out for this, but of course they still follow up, and they'll call the daughter and she'll say, no, it's my mom. Then we'll have the number for the caregiver too, and they can follow up that way. So I think when it works, it really works. And clearly we can keep finding ways to improve it. And sometimes people also will call, just find out about the information, and then say, I don't want to do the form. I'm just not comfortable. And you know what? We totally respect that. And it's always an option at some time if they want to. And sometimes just knowing their rights. You know, there's little things that I know some families do. And I'm not so sure if Rick's going to love me saying this, but some families have a thing about no lights and sirens because they don't want everyone in the neighborhood to see the squad cars coming and hear them and peek out their windows, but they need to call 911 and they need assistance. So now they know they can say no lights and sirens, please. And it's honored. To the best of my knowledge, and I've never heard a complaint from the families. And so I think that's like a tiny thing we can do to help people to keep their privacy, still stay safe, still feel comfortable calling 911 when they need to. And for the officer to know also what they're walking into. I mean, obviously they know what they're doing, but it helps when you walk in, you know what you're entering. So those are all parts that I think have made the program better. The feedback from people, like I know we're all open to hearing ways to improve it and things we can do. And we continue to get training. I continue to reach out and try to get more resources. And anything else like any of you can do to help us or to get the word out, it is for everybody in Lake Forest. And there is a need. And we are so open to hearing any creative, interesting ways to change it or adapt it. And we have also, you know, tried to do some different things. So it is a work in progress. One of the things for me that makes it just, to me, wonderful, because obviously mental health is so important to me in caring for the people, is the officers, because it starts on the top, really respect this piece of it and want to do the best for the residents and want to de-escalate the situations and make it as little or as least traumatic as they can. And so we all learn from each other. And so for me, it's a wonderful thing to be able to be part of Lake Forest. So I want to thank everybody for listening and for any input you can give us. And just say thanks for being here. I think there's a question, but I'm not sure who it's for.
Helps by unmute. For you, for the parents who begin the journey with an autistic child, are they aware of this support net that of awareness alerting your department that they have the family member and this is a good thing if they want to? Do you think they're aware of that in this community?
I think some are, because we have a lot of families that have called, come in, filled out the form. Mm-hmm. And I think they pass it to each other. Like it's, you know, they have a network of each other, but no, I don't think everybody knows. Mm-hmm. And, you know, with different people in the schools and some turnover, maybe it's a good point that we should reach back out to the school social workers and make sure that they know that this exists, because I think it can be really helpful for them.
Hey, Linda. Just to chime in real quick, that is something that I give to our special ed department every year. So our special ed department gets our CIT form and sends it home to all of their students at the beginning of every year. Now, if they fill it out and submit it, that's up to them. But I every year I do get that form to them, and it does go home for at least our special education department here at the high school.
Okay, so I think it's just going to take time for everyone to know. And sometimes they do know. They just aren't interested in being part of it right now.
Mm-hmm. We have another question. What kinds of accommodations are made for someone who is deaf? That comes from Emily. Emily, do you want to expand on that question?
Not really. I think it should be pretty clear that you may be coming upon someone who can't hear and maybe has some crisis. Are there anyone in the department who knows ASL?
So, Commander Anderson, if you don't mind me speaking on that, I actually had a minor in college in communicative disorders, and ASL was one of them. I am very rusty because it's one of those things, if you don't use it, you kind of lose it. But I am, you know, I do know how to sign in ASL and get by with a little bit of finger spelling if need be. But there are resources to reach out. Even if we need like a Spanish translator, we reach out to other communities around us, surrounding neighborhoods and police departments. If they have someone, they reach out and we'll call dispatch, and if they'll call around and see if we need somebody. But, you know, on a traffic stop, it's fairly, you know, we have officers that get by using, you know, just scribing to back and forth to communicate with that individual.
I wonder if we might hear a little bit now on from Mark and Ben, and allow me to introduce our student resource officers. Mark is a 12-year veteran of the Lake Forest Police Department. He began his career as a patrol officer with many specialty assignments such as field training officer, rapid deployment instructor, bike officer, and truck enforcement officer. As an SRO, Officer Long is the lead instructor for the Leaders program, which is for 5th and 8th graders, as well as the lead instructor for Risk Watch for K through 4th grade students. SRO Long is also facilitates the police department's week-long Junior Citizens Police Academy for rising 7th and 8th grade students. And he also earned his Bachelor of Arts in Criminal Justice from Carthage College. Ben Grum is a 16-year veteran of the Lake Forest Police Department. He started his career as a community service officer and a 911 dispatcher before becoming a police officer. He has held multiple special assignments, including truck enforcement, bike officer, exposure control officer, Risk Watch instructor, Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and officer in charge. He is currently the SRO for the high schools in Lake Forest, which includes Lake Forest High School, Woodlands, and Lake Forest Academy. SRO Grum has an associate's degree in fire science management, a bachelor's in business, and is currently finishing up an MBA at North Park University. He grew up locally in Lake Bluff, attended Lake Forest High School, and is currently a board member on both the Montessori School of Lake Forest and Lake Bluff Youth Baseball Association. Welcome, and we'd love to hear more about the SRO program.
Hi, thanks for having us. We appreciate the time to talk to you guys about our program. I know me and Mark both are very vested in the SRO program. This is my last year. So I'm stepping down and going back to the road and doing some different things, but I've been in for 6 years and I've enjoyed my time as an SRO. So I just want to kind of give a little bit of background, and then I think Mark's going to go into more of the programming stuff. So our program started in 1997. It actually was the second SRO program in existence in Lake County. Gurnee was the first, and ours was the second. Our program is unique in a few different ways. One, we did not base our school resource officer program off of any national program or any other department's program. It was designed by a Lake Forest police officer to fit the needs of our community. And since then, we've tweaked it and worked with that and made it better as time went on. Another really unique part of our particular program is in a lot of towns, the school pays for the SRO 100% out of the school budget. In Lake Forest, when that discussion was had, the police department actually kept paying some of our salary because they wanted us to be able to serve the private schools in the community. So because the high school doesn't pay our whole salary like most communities, that does free us up to assist out at our private schools in town. We are both stationed out of our public school. By and large, we do most of our work at the public schools, but me and Mark both definitely make appearances, give some classes, and will assist the staff at our public schools as needed. So our program is based off of NASRA, which is the National Association of school resource officers, which they base the SRO program on three major areas. One is we are definitely law enforcement, right? There's no hiding the fact that we are police officers and we do have to enforce laws. The second is guest lecturer and teacher. So a lot of our time is spent teaching different classes, and I think Mark will talk about leaders, because as the years go on, we do less teaching and we get involved in a few different areas. So I do less teaching than Mark does. And then the last is obviously counselor and advocate for the students. So we do a lot of counseling here at the school. The school has, over even my 6 years here, has expanded their social working department. And so they take on a lot more, but a lot of times us as police officers kind of come in from a different angle, and students relate to different people differently. And I've been able to reach and work with kids that the social workers can't. And when I'm running into problems with a student and we're not really working well together, and I don't think I'm getting my point across, I can reach out to our social workers and they can communicate with them. So I work with our social working staff probably more than our deans. Our deans are kind of more they do disciplinary type stuff. So I do work with them, but most discipline in a school is left to the school, and we do not get involved in that unless they basically ask us. And then we'll have a conference and kind of discuss the proper outcome. And the school, 9 out of 10 times, we follow the school's lead in terms of what they think should happen in a particular situation or case. Let me see what else I wanted to touch on. So we are a resource to the school. We do a lot of programs. So me and Mark work with our security director. Both 67 and 115 have a security director that is in charge of their staff. We work with them to formulate plans in terms of our security plans, our safety plans. We work with them and make sure that our required drills get done at the school, and we monitor those drills to make sure they're done properly, such as fire drills. We have to do a lockdown drill now every year, bus evacuation drills. So all those drills, we work with the school and make sure that they get done, and we sign off that they've been accomplished. We do work with the high school, or at least at the high school, we have what's called core teams. If you have a high school student, you've probably heard that, and it's a team of professionals at the high school that involves a teacher, a social worker, a guidance counselor, their dean, and then on occasions where they think there's something going on, where having a police officer in the mix would assist, I get brought in and help with those core teams. And then we also act as a liaison to city services. So I can tell you from my experience at the high school, I do all of our permitting, I do all our permitting with the city. So graduation, prom, all the events that occur at the high school, they need to file for permitting just like you would at your home if you were going to have a party with amplified music or whatever it may be. So I'm able to work through that permitting process and assist them in getting those set up and getting the inspectors out to inspect tents and do all the stuff that we need to do to make sure that the event's going to be safe. And then just the day-to-day things in terms of, you know, sometimes streets don't get plowed around the school as much as they liked, or the sidewalk's not clear between the school and remote and stuff like that. I'm kind of a resource to them where I can get right to the people who need to be made aware of the issues and get them taken care of. So a lot of our job is that liaison work between the school and the city services. So that's kind of where we come into the mix at the schools and kind of what we do on a day-to-day basis. I mean, the majority of our job is to advocate for the children and the kids in the schools. Majority of our job is to make sure they're safe. We truly try to stay out of discipline in a school at all costs unless it really is deemed necessary and is done by, is initiated by the school to us. I can tell you in my time at the high school, my presence in this building has probably brought multiple crimes forward that would have never been brought any other way. The fact that the social workers have access to me, they can walk in my office with a student who may be a little bit nervous about having a conversation with me. opens that door to where we can really start to investigate and make headway and advocate for kids when there are problems outside of school. And that liaison work between the school and our patrol division, who are responding to calls on the weekends, right? So our patrol division regularly emails me and Mark and says, hey, we responded to this kid's house. And what we're able to do is we're able to get that information to the social working staff here at the school. So Monday morning, when that student comes into the building, they can have a check-in with that kid, and they can make sure that that kid has the services they need and that they're doing okay. And, just make sure that they're ready to learn and be in the school and be here safely. So we're able to do that liaison work between the road and the police department. And like Linda was talking earlier about the CIT program, the one thing that we kind of had this gap in at the school is, as we all know, if teachers leave after 9 months, right? June graduation, teachers, social workers. I mean, this building basically shuts down for the summer. And that was a gap in services for kids who are using our social workers because they aren't around for 3 months. And just because they're not in school doesn't mean that they don't have or need assistance. So we've been able to make that gap between our social workers here and Linda. So she can fill in if needed over the summer and check in with some of the kids and be a resource here in town when a lot of the staff is not here. So that's been kind of one of those introductions we've made to integrate the mental health services at the high school with the services we offer as a police department. In terms of education, I'm going to turn over to Mark. He can tell you a little bit more about the program at Deer Path and some of the educational opportunities that we provide for the kids.
Hello. So we do Leaders. It was developed well before my time by a past SRO after the DARE program was found to actually not work very well and actually introduce kids to drugs. They came up with Leaders. It's been used in multiple other agencies as kind of a platform to get out in front of kids. And we talk about a lot of stuff, way more than drugs. Today, Officer Mai and I, we taught to 3 different classes of 5th graders about juvenile law. So we taught them about things that are going to come up in that's age appropriate for them, right? Things like curfew, things like disorderly conduct for how they act while they go up to Market Square after school on half days traditionally when they're in school. We touch on things like, talking about calling 911, and different aspects of what laws really affect their age group. So we gear everything very much towards their age group. The majority of the students that we teach are 5th grade. 5th grade is when we go through drugs and alcohol, juvenile law, personal safety. And personal safety we like to do in the fall because they'll be out trick-or-treating. And we deal with if they're home alone and what they could do and ways they could keep themselves safe and be aware while they're out in public and make sure that if something feels off that they know how to react and who to go to and find a trusted adult. We do a lot of internet safety. I saw somebody ask a question about, do we teach bullying? We teach bullying all the way through because we end up teaching 6th and 7th and 8th grade later and maybe 1 or 2 classes throughout the year compared to 6 or 7 for 5th grade. But every year an aspect of bullying is put in. Our main one when they're in 5th grade is we talk about internet safety and we talk about just interacting with people on the internet. We know that kids are on the internet way more now when they're on video games because they're connected almost 24/7. So we touch on that. The big time that we get into cyberbullying is 6th grade. I do a complete class on cyberbullying alone. And we go over how it affects other students, how it affects the person actually being bullied, how it affects the bully. And then we teach the kids how to, if they see bullying going on or they're on the internet and seeing this, how they could come meet with a trusted adult, how they could trusted adult could be me, their teacher, their parent, bring that forward and show what happens. And we also teach them also how we investigate this and things that we could do. So they understand that once they put something out to somebody on the internet, that they understand that it is there permanently. We will be able to find it. And if it becomes a crime, we could address it properly so that it will stop. We also teach them what it could lead to, where it could lead to suicide, and it could lead to people, coming in and hurting other students because of that. And in 5th grade is when we like to bring in other officers too. I think it's great. I try to get as many officers involved. So now the kids, they all know me because they see me during normal school, not pandemic schools. I constantly walk the halls. I'm in the halls every single passing period saying hi. When students are dropped off in the morning, I stand at one of the doors. So during last year, I'd switch it up, 7th, 8th grade side or the 5th grade, 6th grade side. And when I first started doing that, I know parents talked to officers in town and thought, that I was waiting for a kid. I was just actually wanted my face out there so that they knew who I was, so I could become that trusted adult, so we could build this, relationship where they know if something happened, they could come to me. So we try to do that every morning. Officer Mayan or I are out there right now. We check the kids in after they do their self-screener and get them their ticket and say good morning to all the kids. We try to build that relationship. So the 5th graders and the school knows me. So when we do leaders, I try to push it out to all the other officers to say, hey, who wants to come teach leaders? So we'll have an officer come in full uniform and teach in front of them. So now, that officer might be working 3 to 11. They see them in school. They just taught them on bike safety. And now they're up at suites with their parents, and that officer's on his break for his 3 to 11 shift. And now that interaction becomes, hey, weren't you Officer Dazovi who was here with us? And it really just bridges that gap between the police and the community. And I think it helps us bridge a gap between adults too, because I know if my child recognized a police officer, it would open my ability to start a conversation with that officer out in public. So as many officers that we could get in there and in front of the kids, we think is great. Usually when it gets into 6th, 7th, and 8th, those are kind of like a specialty class for that class. I usually teach them. So in 6th grade, last year, the leaders program is done through the wellness program. So I work with the PE wellness teachers, and we do it in their week of health. Mr. Vancast, if you guys had any kids that went through Deer Path Middle School, probably know Mr. Vancast. He came to me and asked if we could put together a vape presentation. He heard kids talking about vaping more often. So I used stuff that we got through LEAD, stuff we've already used, and then went on I believe Stanford put one together and created a program. So we create programs when teachers ask for them, when they think that there's a need for it. So we do a full lesson on vaping and the effects of it and things that are in there just to educate the kids. 6th grade, has this program been done this year? The vape one has not been done this year yet. 6th grade cyberbullying, I spoke with every 6th grade student via Zoom in the fall, and we did the cyberbullying was the first lesson. The teachers and I sat down and thought we needed to do internet safety for 5th grade right away, and we needed to do cyberbullying for 6th grade because they are sitting on their computers all day doing virtual school. And we realized that there was chats going on Google Chat during that, and they were leading to a little bit of some bullying. And that's the uniqueness of our program, is when the staff sees something, we could try to tailor it to them. Just recently, I usually teach the middle school and down, and Ben teaches the high school. And we have Fusion Academy that is located near Starbucks on our West Side business district. Teacher reached out to me and said, hey, do you have anything on internet safety? And I said, I do. What age group? And she has middle schoolers all the way through high school. So I'm going to build a whole new program and teach that in March for the students that are out there. 7th grade, we start teaching kids about sexting and the harms of it and the ramifications of it. And the reason that we started doing that for 7th grade, and that started prior to me, is they had a case at our school where 2 7th graders were sending each other nude photos. So we're like, okay, it's a need. Let's create a program. Let's teach kids. Let's educate them on the cause and effect of sending that out and what the ramifications could be. In 8th grade, depending on what they've got going on, we do minor consumption and social hosting as they go to high school and have a possibility of going to parties where alcohol will be served. We want them to learn the cause and effect of that also. I saw there was a bunch of questions. I wasn't able to see them as they came up.
I've been keeping an eye on them, Mark. So scrolling back toward the beginning, you touched on leaders and bullying, that we do kind of touch on that. The next one is working with kids with drug and alcohol problems. We definitely do. A lot of times it's more identifying the problem and then getting them to the right resources. Because we do have, different resources between me and the school and different staff here. So we work with it. And then obviously if the kid gets in trouble, either with the school or criminally with us, or a diversion program with us, we obviously will usually require some sort of either counseling or classes reference drug and alcohol problems. The next question was about sexual assaults. Yes, a lot of them actually come out in the school environment with the social workers or with me because I'm here and I am trusted. So I would say in my 6 years here, I've probably brought about 25 students up to the Lake County Advocacy Center to be interviewed by a forensic interviewer. The school and me being in the school is able to get a lot of this information out and for us and the state's attorneys to do an accurate investigation because when it comes out in a school, typically it's someone in the household. And so being in a school, I can take protective custody and I can make sure that those interviews happen at the state's attorney's office. Whereas a lot of times the information needed to initiate those investigations doesn't come out outside of the school environment. So we definitely take a lot of sexual assault complaints. Again, not all of them are end up being sexual assaults, but I have had a handful confirmed that initiated out of the high school based on information that's brought to a social worker or to me here. The next question, we'll touch back on mental illness, I think, with the CIT people, but the next big question for us is data exchange between the schools and us. So that has changed drastically in my 6 years. My first year here, we had the weekend list and we would come in and I'd sit down with the deans and the athletic director and I would give them a list of our high school arrests from over the weekend for alcohol, drugs, whatever. Since then, case law has changed and we no longer can do that. Basically, what we can do is we can communicate information to people who could help the child. So obviously giving it to deans and athletic directors had more of a punitive connection to them. So that is no longer allowed. What is allowed is if I have dealt with, or one of my coworkers have dealt with or arrested a minor, let's say 2 or 3 times outside of school for alcohol, I can reach out to our social workers and say, hey, I really want you to meet with the student and talk with them. I think they might have an alcohol problem. So we can disseminate information to the school, but it has to be, the reason for the dissemination has to either be for, to get the student help that they need to address an issue, or 2, it has to be a school safety issue. So if someone were to threaten another student with bodily harm or threaten to do something at school or to damage the school or something like that, where I can say there is a danger that the school needs to know about, I can communicate that information. But alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, those types of communication to the school, unless it's to a social worker or a drug counselor, are kind of forbidden by law. So we're not allowed to do that, which in general, I agree with. I think where we run into some problems, which is pretty disappointing for me, is you all know that high school kids have to sign the athletic code. For me, it's sad to see how many kids are outright violating the athletic code, and that we have parents that aren't making them follow through and do what they're supposed to do. You know, I mean, when they sign the athletic code, a lot of times that's the first time they've signed a document. And by allowing a student not to self-report when they have violated it, I think it's sending the wrong message. So that's the interesting part is I am a unique person in the fact that I'm at the school and at the police department. And I really am truly the only person that sees the discrepancies between athletic code violations and violations that we know occur that don't make it to the school. It's just kind of an interesting perspective, an interesting position to be in, to be able to see that and really be the only person that knows that that's going on. I think that addressed most of the questions. Anything else I haven't gotten off the list?
I think you've touched on all the questions. I think we'd like to post some resources on our website, and perhaps we'll put our heads together after this and what might be your top 5 or whatever resources we'd like to, again, pass along through our channels of information. Thank you very much, everybody. This has been a content-filled evening, and I think everybody else is probably soaking it all in and just thinking about it. Again, thank you to all the speakers, and thank you for the work that you do, and especially in this difficult pandemic time. And we look forward to all being back together and meeting at Gorton and hearing more about the program. Again, thank you all the members who are here, and stay safe tomorrow with the storm. And again, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys.
Bye.
Thank you. This was great.
Thanks so much.